Good. We're going to record on the computer. So how are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, ticking along.
Ticking along, and thank you for coming along. Right. So what I've been doing is in the last few weeks I've been working. Oh, lovely to see you.
I know. Sorry, I'm in the. My home office is in the garage, so it's like.
And you do not need to apologise, because this is it, right? This is the way it is. So, and just to fill you in, so I am not in Auckland at the moment, so I've actually managed to get to Nelson in time to
good.
before lockdown to see my children. So I've managed to find a house within 2 hours.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
I know. I'm very grateful for a wonderful support network of people, and everything sort of transpired and moved, and I get to see them every 5 days, which is just amazing. So
that's cool.
Really good opportunity. So, so what I've been doing with a lot of my clients over the last few weeks since this, or before it happened and since this has happened, is really looking at particular topics that are coming up for employees, but also leaders. And so one of the ones that for today, and I think there's another one after this, is really around how do I melt my feelings of overwhelm and fear and anxiety and all that sort of stuff that's coming up. Because although we know that it's unprecedented times and we know that this is a new normal, is it a new normal? I don't even know whether I want to call it that anymore, because we don't actually know what it is. It's like the new change, right? Every day is a change. And so what I wanted to really focus on today in this session is really exploring and giving some coping strategies for looking at things in a slightly different way when they come up. So you would be a great person to start with. So if you were talking about what's the thing do you think that's come up the most for you in the last couple of weeks?
Oh, look, the biggest thing for me is the lack of people contact. For me, the part of working in an office is it's the buzz and it's the environment and it's the people. So although I've had experience of working from home in the past, it's always been balanced. So it's been a couple of days at home and then 3 days in the office, and now it's like full time at home. And so it's definitely a challenge, and it's probably also a challenge because I've got a team who aren't a high performing team. So they weren't a high performing team going into this. In fact, I just kicked off a restructure of the team, which is now on hold. So that's a challenge as well.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, cool. And so of course that creates, if you're in a role or you've started a new role or you haven't actually ever worked from home before, and I think the first distinction I want to make is that this isn't about working at home because we choose to. It's about working from a remote location because we have to. And I think there's a mindset shift with both of those, right? So mindset shift, and that's great. If I choose to do it, I'll apply some strategies in a different way to having to do it. So one of the things I want to just start, so today if we look at fear, anxiety, overwhelm, and some of your teams will be facing that as well, because if they haven't had, because let's face it, people have been sometimes in their physical location for, 35 years or something like that, right? 25 years. And so all they identify with is going to work in a place of work where their physical location is. And that physical location is their clothing and their comfortable cloak. And so when you take people out of that and you put them in their home environment, which is different again, and can bring up a whole change and range of emotions depending on whether people are on their own, whether they've now got a whole family or extended family working from home, and they're all trying to find their space and place and actually create that same unique identifier in their home. And that's one of the things in terms of structure that I think when we look at first is, in order to start to look at dealing with fear and anxiety and overwhelm, what we know in times of trauma, and let's call this a time of trauma because it's something that we can't control. So this virus is a catalyst for change, regardless of how we look at it. And so we can't control what the end point for that is. So if we look back at some of the research around fear and anxiety, what comes up when you're dealing with anxiety is that you've got to have a tormentor. Now, if we break down the word tormentor, tor is about teaching you, and mentor is a mentor that teaches you what you need to heal. And I think this is a really important concept. I've been doing some work with Dr. Russell also is in the neuroscience piece. And I think those of us that are starting to feel this fear, anxiety, and overwhelm, it's because what's happened is we've gone out of our physical environment that we're used to, and we're used to behaving and being in a certain way. And we've now taken ourselves into our home environment, and that home environment or that remote home has another set of behaviors attached to it. So the very first step, what I want to do is go, okay, so if the virus is the change agent, then we have to look at what's driving the fear, and we've got to come all the way back to self and go, what is it that I'm feeling, because we have to do the feeling, in terms of what is my mentor. So what is that? What's that coming up for me? And see, for some, it could be that that's that feeling of isolation. It's the feeling of abandonment. It's the feeling of self-value, because we're now no longer in our certain place where we know and we sit. And it's even been interesting for me, having sort of living in someone else's house with half a suitcase of clothes, some technology, and going, you know, this is what it is, but it's my unique identifier of having all my stuff around me isn't there. But we can still create, so we have to do a mind shift to create a different experience, I guess. And so one of the first things I want to do is, okay, so what is it when that fear and anxiety and overwhelm comes up? So I want to spend a couple of minutes just jotting down for me. So what is it that you need to know around that? So what's come up? So I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. Okay, so if we've got some parts, those are the parts that we've come up with there that we need to heal. So we've got to observe, you know, when those are coming up now. So a lot of it is around when is it coming up. So some of it will be loneliness, the isolation, the scared, I hazard a guess, will have come up from childhood experiences. And some of us have been through that personal development cycle, so we know what our trigger cycle is, right? So this is for those of you who haven't, we have a trigger cycle that when we're kind of generally dominated by protection paths. So we're in this box and we behave and know what to do when we become we feel a little bit scared or unsure of what the outcome is, so we have ourselves in this box and we behave in a certain way. But subconsciously we have this piece of us that actually goes, okay, so that's where that flicks in. But coming back out of that is like, this is totally new again. So for some of you who have done no personal development, the fear, the anxiety, and the overwhelm, and this loneliness and scared is just purely part of that. So we don't need to make it wrong. We don't need to go, hey, I'm having all these thoughts and the person that I work with isn't. It's purely dependent upon you and what's coming up for you. And so what I want to do is, instead of looking at, because there's just so much, I don't know about you guys, but there's so much doom and gloom in the paper, right? So we're seeing the cases and we need to know that, but it's like, you know, businesses are going to fail, this is going to happen, and it's all doom and gloom. So what we've got to really start to look at and go is, how do we get through this? So what am I going to do to come out the other side stronger and more resilient? Yeah. And so when I'm looking at working with teams now, it's not about helping them through this piece, but it's going, if we were to use this as a personal development learning and go, how can I come out of COVID-19 a much stronger and more resilient person, employee, leader, whatever it is that we do, mother, parent, father, whatever. What is it that I need to learn about myself? And I think this is a really lovely time to be able to have a little bit more time and freedom of time to do that. So with the stuff that's come up, so we just have to observe that that is the piece that needs healing, right? So we're just going to leave that to one side at a moment, for the moment, right? When we come into those of you who are particularly feeling fear, fear means false expectations appearing real, yeah? False expectations appearing real. So remember that our fear is driven from, you know, what we need to learn and heal in ourselves. And the only reason that we need to learn and heal it in ourselves is because we're not used to feeling it like this. So it's just an unknown. Just like the virus is an unknown, it's our own fear that's unknown again, because we can't possibly control that situation. So when we come back and look, I want to give you a couple of coping strategies now. When we come into your day right now, for those of you who are in this space, I want you really to write down these 4 things. We're going to go through them, right? Predictability is number 1. So write down predictability. Yeah. Predictability is all about trust and trust in self. So what I mean by that is if we assume that COVID-19 is creating some traumas that we're feeling, and we know that we're feeling the trauma because we've got this heightened sense of emotions, heightened sense of fear, expectations, whatever that is, then basically we feel that we're unable to do anything to change that situation so it stays as a trauma, right? All we can do is to control our reaction to it and help calm. So we've got to start to look at the chaos outside and make our world that we're in now calm and predictable. So with the trust and predictability, what we have to do is go, okay, predictability is all about creating a sense of what I can and can't control. So it may be that in predictability, it's about what can I do today? What can I do this week? What can I do in the next hour? So predictability is hugely important to go, you know what? I'm going to trust that this is going to be over in some period of time. So when I trust that, the predictability piece is I'm creating some sort of trust in myself that this is okay, right? So that's number 1, predictability. Number 2, I want some structures. So this is where, this is vitally important in the work I've been doing and with my guys over the last few weeks, is what is my structure? So what I mean by that is I'm getting up at the same time, I'm having breakfast, I'm doing my walk, I'm doing, and this is where you need to have, when we live in fear, anxiety, and overwhelm, immobility or no mobility can sometimes take over. And so what I mean by that is we kind of feel helpless. Remember I said to change our situation because that's the trauma. So therefore we do very little of other stuff. So we might not be doing the exercise. We might not be doing our eating 100%. We might have increased our drinking or substance abuse. We might have done some stuff that's just like, that's a coping mechanism. I want you to really start to look at that and look and go, okay, well, where is my structure? Because if you can't tell me that the structure is, I'm doing this and this and this, and it needs to have some breaks in it. So when we're working in an office environment, I think we forget sometimes that we do take that time to stop and talk to people. Yeah, we go and get a cup of tea, or we meet outside if we're having a smoke, or we do that social interaction thing that's really important. What I'm observing is that when people are at home and working remotely, there's this danger of overworking. And I'm starting to see that, right? So those of us who are a little bit isolated and not necessarily connecting in with others are kind of overcompensating and doing more and more and more. And they're obviously in line for burnout because we can't continue to work like that. So for example, what I mean is, as people are putting in change plans in their work environments, I'm hearing this often. I've done 2 weeks worth of work in 4 days. I've done, I'm working 12-hour days. Okay, that's not the purpose of this working remotely. It's about somehow we've confused, because I'm working remotely, no one can see me, so I need to do more. Okay, so that's why I want to get really clear. If you've got teams, that you are managing the structure of those teams. So the structure is, what are you doing? And it's not micromanaging, and the way that we sell it to them is that we're actually looking after your own health. We're making sure that you are emotionally and physically fit and resilient to be able to do what you need to do. So if there is overwhelm and you are doing more, we need to stop that. And just as well, we need to look for the patterns around productivity. So structure is number 2. Number 3 is boundaries. So there has to be some boundaries in place in your home environment or your remote working environment, wherever you are. It's like, so when is the shut off and cut off time? The start and cut off time, just like in a work environment. Now, this is where your usual, I get to work at 7:30 in the morning and I leave at 5:30 or 5. This is where this mindset shift has to change. Because remember, the fear and anxiety is driving this. So we're saying, I've got to sometimes do more. I'm feeling really disconnected. I'm feeling discombobulated. I'm not quite sure, because I'm not quite sure where I am. I'm sitting at the kitchen bench, or I'm sitting wherever I'm sitting in my space, and I'm trying to juggle my kids as well. So I'm struggling all over the show. So therefore, I'll just keep working in every single gap. So we've got to put some boundaries in place that say, well, what times am I going to work and what times am I going to shut off? And this is where setting up other stuff outside of work, for those of you, is vitally important. So what does that look like? Whether that's going back to, and I'm seeing this as part of the flour shortage, right? So I'm seeing so many people baking, which is awesome, yeah? Home baking, doing cool stuff with kids. It's about being off devices. It's about in that fresh air. When we're sitting in that one environment, it doesn't seem to matter as much as when we're at work. However, I do think there's the way that we work is going to have to change, right? Because actually now, having done this, I think it's about getting out in that fresh air time. So those of you who want to go for a walk at lunchtime and generally never have time, this is the time for you to do it. This is the time for you to get out there and, get focused and do some stuff that you haven't done, or whether it's exercise program online or yoga, or I saw some dry swimming on land, that's quite cool. That looks quite fun. Whatever it is with the kids, you stop them and do that too, or your partner, whatever that looks like, right? So it's really, really important that boundaries and discipline, self-discipline, are hugely important right now. So these are things that you can also put in place for yourself and also for your team. Now, the 4th one is expectations. So if you're a team leader, what I'm expecting you to be able to do right now through this is have your teams and individuals within your teams really understand what your expectation is of them over the day. Because this creates some of the fear and anxiety. If in the last few weeks I've sort of talked to people and gone, so when are you checking in with your team? I send them an email every day. Well, if we think about that, they've seen you every day for the last 20 years, and now you're sending them an email. They go, I give them a call. I'm like, okay, so how are they doing? Oh yeah, they're fine. So we don't know if they're fine or not fine because we need to visually see them. And this is where this visual, and I'm sure a lot of you are doing it, the Zoom connections, but it's not only with your team and setting team expectations, but it's also individually with them, just like you would normal environment, to check in and make sure that you are looking for the patterns around how they're actually showing up. So whether there's where there is the anxiety, there's this feeling of self-worth, isolation, it's very, looking at the research, some people who have been predetermined to have some anxiety issues in their home environment, it might not be the same. It may show up in people who traditionally have come to work and you've gone, yep, they're going to be fine. Yep, they're fine. So I think you've got to really use a new lens when it comes to the expectations around what you expect of yourself and you expect of others. And this is where the clarity in terms of getting through the week and ensuring that they've got social connection time online with their colleagues, they've got social connection time with you on a one-on-one basis, and that you have got social connection time with your peers of leaders. So if you're sitting there and going, I haven't spoken to my manager in a couple of weeks, or any of my peer colleagues at my level, then this is the time that you need to start setting those up, because others will be feeling the same. We've had a couple of weeks now, and so my view on the world is that depending on how long this goes on for, we've got a couple of weeks before some of those restlessness, and we've got rhythms going now, which is fantastic, but we've got this I think there's this real weight around overcompensation and work and restlessness on the other side, and restlessness can lead to reckless and reckless can lead to increased overwhelm and fear, especially as organisations are looking at perhaps cost reduction methods, and if they're not transparent or working through that process, you've also got another layer of financial stress coming through from that, which is going to create more fear. So when we start to get financial fear in a family or in a home environment, that creates another set of anxiety, or another set of anxieties. So those are the 4 things that I really want you to look at. So first of all, just to recap where we are right now, we're looking at any feelings of fear, anxiety, overwhelm really come from, what we have to do is go tormentor. So what are we learning? What do we need to learn from this? So what are this is teaching us what we need to learn the most. If we focus on the fear, I want you to notice how you feel towards it, and then come back in to relate to perhaps that childhood experience where you first felt it or saw it and seen it play out over your life. And that's the piece that we need to do the healing on, right? So the first bit is then looking at, because if we're feeling fearful and we're feeling anxious, we need to create, so observe that, and we're creating our boundaries, our predictability, our structure, and our expectations. They're all in place now, right? So we've now got a whole bunch of structure so that we can actually feel like we are achieving. And that's part of it, right? We feel like we're actually doing what we need to do. And discipline, repetition is everything that we need to do there, right? Okay. So now, some of us, in terms of tolerating anxiety, there's two ways we can think of it. If we're highly, highly anxious and we're tolerating it, we talk about what ifs. But what if I get COVID-19? What if I lose my job? What if my children get sick? What if I get sick? What if? And so what we tend to do is we'll find evidence everywhere to have us stay in this space, because remember, this is where we've been living when we're in this trigger mode, and that's all we know in that space as a child. So what I want you to do is focus on then what. So the next step is I want you to write all your what ifs down, And beside the what if, so for example, what if I get COVID-19? Then what? So the then what becomes your plan again. So it's that predictability, it's that structure and the expectations around that. If I get COVID-19, then this is the plan, right? Then what? Da, 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 da. What if I lose my job? Right? Okay. What if? Then we do the then what. So we've created almost an action plan which gives us some ability to function and understand, so that if that situation comes up, a lot of the time, because a lot of this what ifs will come up when we are sleeping or wake up in the night because we can't sleep, or we're in almost like a panic-like state where we've got ourselves so wound up that we're like, but what if this happens and this happens, and I just feel like, poor me, I'll go into a victim and I can't do anything about it, right? So this just takes over. So if we can actually preempt some of that stuff, so what if, then what? That's going to give you, and then we go into the coping strategy of one day at a time. Okay, so what is it that I'm going to do today? So my what if is that, what if I can't get through, what if my test comes back positive, right? So all we can do is do an hour at a time. So this is where we come down to the structure of what it is that we're actually trying to achieve over the day. Okay, what if my mum, dad, brother, sister, whatever gets it, right? So you've got a plan there that you can work, and then you have to come back into the just focusing perhaps on one thing at a time, 1 hour, 1 day, one, and get through and tick that box and get to the next one. Because it's the ruminating of the anxiety and all of the stuff that actually creates the stress in the gut, particularly, which then creates the fear, which then creates the body going into its panic zone. Because not only will you be looking, this is an inward thing, but externally, physically, the body changes as well, right? So whether your coping mechanism is to take in food at this time as a protective layer, or it's to take in other things to make us feel better for a very short period of time, we've got to become really observant in keeping all of that stuff in moderation. Especially I was doing some meditation this morning to Guru Dev, one of the gurus in India, and he says, just the times like this, to build your immunity, we've got to cut sugar necessarily, we've got to cut it out. So come back into the then what. There's also those of us who then go, well, I should have done this, or I could have done that, or I would have done that had I have known, right? If you're getting into those things, there's nothing that's just purely another way for you to self-punish or self-harm yourself because you weren't able to make the difference that you wanted to make. So let's get really, really clear on plans. So in order to tolerate anxiety, we're going to do, just to summarize, we're going to do two things, right? You're going to write down all the what if scenarios and then the then whats. Yeah? Those are your coping strategies. The then what is your plan. The coping strategies related to 1 day at a time, 1 hour at a time, whatever it is that we're doing. So if we're at home and we're feeling disconnected, or we're feeling a little bit socially isolated, the reality is to write that down and go, well, what if I don't, I'm feeling like this all the time, what can I do? The plan is then what? So we've got to actually put some stuff in place that has you actually action it. And then it's about you actioning it. Because here's the thing, it comes back to choice at the end of the day as well, right? So we can have this fear live through us and we breathe it. And therefore we're taking remember we came back to the mentor. That means that we're not wanting to actually heal what it is we need to know. Remember, we're going to use this situation, this pandemic, as a chance to bring up the parts that we need to heal within ourselves. And how cool is that? That we actually, well, it's not cool that the situation has happened, but we've actually got a time right now where we can all become more connected and understand ourselves in a better way. So we've got that there. Wow, what else do I need to tell you today? What's the time? 40 minutes. Yep, good. controlling predictability and controlling our own reaction is huge here. So one of the things that I really want to encourage also is the sense of how do I explain it? It's about controlling how we react to the news, to media, to people around us, because it's very easy right now to go into such and such seems to be doing so much better than me. So we go into this judgment or comparison mode, but we don't actually know what's going on in their world. And so one of the things that I want you to do as well, and that creates anxiety, right? So it creates anxiety because you go, well, actually, I should be doing better than this. So then that can move into overcompensation or over anxiety and increasing those fear levels, yeah? So what I want you to do, if you catch yourself becoming in that space of comparison, I want you to come back to controlling your own actions and your own reactions, because you've got to stay in your lane more than ever right now, is to stay in your lane and control what you can control in the time frame that you can control it. So here's my promise to you, that if you can openly, in summary, if you can openly accept that the stuff that's coming up for you around in the anxiety, fear, overwhelm is something that you need to heal, then I just want you to observe those stories, and we can deal with some stuff like that after on a one-on-one basis, right? The first step is you're going to put that structure in place and be okay with setting the boundaries, predictability, structure, and expectations. That's going to give you some guidance and some safety net in terms of getting stuff done and starting to create or disconnect some of that feeling of out of control. Because at the end of the day, the virus is out of our control. How we react and act and connect and do and discipline and repetition are all in our choice and in our control. So the coping strategy is tolerating it, is putting in some what if plans so that we know that if this does happen, we're not having to ruminate again and again and again and again. And we're putting those plans in place that go, okay, so if I've just got that now, I know I've got a plan, I can tick that off in my head and go back to what it is I need to be doing in my own lane. So, and then controlling how we react and the choices that we make to stay in the space that we're in. So I've gone quite quickly through that, but that's the first part of it. I don't really want to give you much more today, because that's actually, and taking, building immunity, is all about, part of this is taking responsibility for our self-care, which is highly, 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 highly critical right now as we're juggling so much stuff. That's quite different for us. So that's really having a good look at making some commitment to maybe making one or two choices that are better, drinking more water, less coffee, more tea, whatever that is, maybe having, 3 glasses of wine instead of 2 bottles, whatever that is as we're going through. The other thing I did want to just put in there is alternate nostril breathing. So if you're not doing any breathing or listening, what I find really, really useful, especially because I have been highly anxious, I understand part of my life is, my life story is around is about being a survivor and being highly resilient, yeah. So one of the things that I've found is really, especially with kids as well, if you've got kids, is just putting on this music, which you might have heard, hopefully you heard when you were sitting in the waiting room there, around calm. So, 3 minutes of a calm or chill mix on Spotify, you just go chill mix 1, is absolutely critical for just quietening the mind, right? So quietening the mind to actually get you into the state for the day. I'd highly recommend an alternate nostril breathing, which actually, if I show you now, is you've got 2 fingers here, you've got your 4th finger on one side and your thumb on the other. These 2 fingers stay the same, and you are going to Breathe in 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, and you out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and you breathe in on the same nose that you breathe out. 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in. 2, 3, 4. If you can't get to 6 to start, go to 4, and then again, so whatever nostril you breathe out of is one that you breathe in with. And what that does is it just clears the chakras for you in terms of just clearing mind and giving you some clarity around just feeling calm and quite peaceful. So meditation is another thing that I have really embraced in the last probably 3 months, more so than ever now, not because I think before I did it because I needed to, now I do it because I choose to, and it's made a significant difference in terms of, especially through this process, in terms of being and setting calmness. Those of you, another last strategy is those of you who are that have a lot of stuff in your head that creates the anxiety. The thing to do is you need to have your journal there, and those of you who know, you need to be writing every day. So whether you put the timer on for 2 minutes, 2 minutes is nothing, right? Here's the thing, we think about we had no time, and yet I've spoken to more people when I've been out walking than I have in a long time when people have actually stopped to talk, because we said we never had the time, we were too busy, and yet 2 minutes goes so quickly. I mean, 47 minutes has gone already, right? So I want you to really embrace, if you do have high creation content, which is also creating anxiety, I want you to go back to your journaling once or twice a day. So I think that's probably enough for you in your heads right now. So I'm going to open up to any questions that you may have, or a chance to open up and ask me anything around maybe your teams, yourself, your organisations. So yeah, let me know. So Anna, how was that for you? She's gone. Okay, guys, well, I'll leave you to it. Yeah, send me any questions you might have after that, and look forward to maybe seeing you at another one. Info at Paradigm Shift is the best place to get me, info at paradigmshift.co.nz, or Rebecca at rebeccamorris.co. Hopefully that was some help. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye.